Well, thanks everyone for coming. Thanks, Jacob, for having me. Thanks for giving me an excuse to clean my room up today. Um, my title is officially, I guess, Shavuot. There's more to the holiday than just cheesecake. It's good that nobody here likes cheesecake because I'm not actually speaking about cheesecake at all, but the Shavuot part is accurate. The question that I'm going to try to address in the time that we have is what exactly is it that we're celebrating on Shavuot? Why is this a Jewish holiday in the first place? What is it that is cause for celebration? So if anyone has ever heard anything about that, what is the holiday of Shavuot about? I'm open for suggestions. If not, then I'm happy we're learning about it, but I'll open it up.
Something to do with the Torah, maybe?
Something to do with the Torah, exactly. We call Shavuot Zman Matan Toratenu, which literally means the day of the giving of our Torah. So that's generally what the holiday of Shavuot is associated with, right? Matan Torah, the receiving of the Torah, the day that we were at Mount Sinai and God gave us the Torah. However, it's not necessarily so simple. And before we get to the answer of what it is that we celebrate on Shavuot, let's try to show why I guess it doesn't make any sense at all. And then at the end of the day, we can put everything together and answer all our questions why it does make sense. So let's begin by comparing Shavuot to other holidays. And let's start with Pesach, or Passover. So the Torah tells us why we celebrate Passover. It says, for in it you went forth from Egypt. It tells us explicitly that what we're celebrating on Passover, it's our freedom, it's our exodus. And therefore, it makes sense why in our prayers on Passover, we define the day as Zman Chirutenu, which means the day of our freedom, the time of our freedom, because that is what we are told is the essence of the holiday of Passover. Then comes the holiday of Sukkot. The Torah tells us that it is Usamachtem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. It's a holiday of rejoice, of simcha, of happiness. The reason for that is a chabura in and of itself. I'd be happy to talk about it, I guess, before Sukkot. I hope not over Zoom. But for now, it just suffices that the Torah defines Sukkot as a holiday of unique happiness, and therefore it also makes a lot of sense why in our prayers on Sukkot we define the day as Zman Simchatenu, which means the time of our gladness or our happiness, because that is the very essence of the holiday of Sukkot. Now, what about Shavuot? What does the Torah tell us about the essence of this holiday? So let's take a quick read. The Torah says, and from the day on which you bring the sheaf of elevation offering, the day after the Sabbath, you shall count 7 weeks. And the 7 weeks are what we're in now, Sfirat Omer, 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuot. They must be complete. You must count the day after the 7th week, 50 days, then you shall bring an offering of new grain to the Lord. You shall bring from your settlements 2 loaves of bread as an elevation offering. Each shall be made of 2/10 of a measure of choice flour, baked after leavening as first fruits to the Lord. With the bread you shall present as burnt offerings to the Lord 7 yearling lambs without blemish, 1 bull of the herd, and 2 rams with their meal offerings and libations, an offering by fire, a pleasing odor to the Lord. You shall also offer 1 he-goat as a sin offering and 2 yearling lambs as a sacrifice of well-being, etc. What does the Torah tell us about the essence of Shavuot? The answer is absolutely nothing. The Torah tells us that there is a sacrificial service. We bring 2 breads, we bring a bunch of lambs and a bull and some rams and a goat, you bring a whole butcher shop, that's it. And the Torah never tells us what it is that we're celebrating. The Torah only tells us how to celebrate it. And all of a sudden, in our prayers for Shavuot, out of nowhere, we're hit with the fact that Shavuot is Zman Matan Toratenu, the time of the giving of our Torah. But why didn't the Torah define the essence of the holiday of Shavuot for us like it did by the other holidays? In fact, the Rivash, Rabbi Isaac ben Sheshet, he was a medieval commentator, he claims that the Torah didn't tell us the essence of Shavuot because it's really not true that the essence of Shavuot is the giving of the Torah. He claims that it's nothing more than a coincidence, that the day that we happen to have been commanded in all of these rituals falls out on the historical date when we received the Torah. But he says there's no intrinsic connection between the holiday of Shavuot and receiving the Torah. And this may be so true to the extent that some texts of our prayers on Shavuot erase that connection between Shavuot and the giving of the Torah entirely. For example, in Masechet Sofrim, it says, what is the text of our prayers? It says, Uvayom Chag HaShavuot Hazeh, this day of Shavuot. What is mysteriously missing from this text of the prayer? The answer is it makes no mention at all that Shavuot is the day of the giving of the Torah, because it could be that the fact that Shavuot falls out on the same day as the revelation of Sinai, it's no more than some mere calendaric coincidence. And it could be that Shavuot has nothing at all to do with the giving of the Torah. However, this seems a little bit far-fetched because it seems glaringly obvious from the Gemara, from the Talmud, that this is not just a mere coincidence. Because the Gemara in Psachim says as follows. Rabbi Eliezer said, all agree with regard to Atzeret, which is the holiday of Shavuot, that we require that it also be for you, meaning that it is a mitzvah to eat and drink and rejoice on that day. Meaning, the holiday is about me, and we'll discuss why later, and therefore I need to treat myself a little bit. There's a mitzvah to eat, there's a mitzvah to drink and be merry. Says the Gemara, what is the reason? It is the day on which the Torah was given, and one must celebrate the fact that the Torah was given to the Jewish people. So it seems clear that according to the Gemara, Shavuot is a celebration of our getting the Torah. But then the question begs itself, and this is my first question, why wouldn't the Torah tell us that? It seems that the Torah left out quite a bit of important information about what Shavuot is. Right? Why is this a holiday in the first place? So what is the Torah teaching us by not teaching us? Right? What is the Torah teaching us by leaving out this information? That's my first question. So let's put that question on the side for now. Let's move on to a few more questions, and we'll come back to that. So even if we were to assume, like the Gemara does, that Shavuot corresponds to the day that we did receive the Torah at Sinai, this also happens to not be so clear, because the Talmud records a dispute between the sages about when exactly was the giving of the Torah. Was it on the 6th day of Sivan, or was it on the 7th day of Sivan? And here it is inside. The sages taught on the 6th day of the month of Sivan, the 10 commandments were given to the Jewish people. Rabbi Yossi says on the 7th day of the month. Okay, so it's a historical dispute. Just to sum up really quickly the discussion in the Gemara there, and I apologize, this may be a little bit complicated, so everyone just bear with me for a minute. Everyone agrees there to two basic facts. Fact number one is that the Jews arrived to Mount Sinai on the 1st day of the month. And fact number two is that everyone agrees that the Torah was given on Shabbos, on the Sabbath. The dispute that they have is regarding what day of the week did they show up, right? What week did they show up to the Mount Sinai? Was it on a Sunday? And that means that the Jews needed 7 full days to prepare and to purify themselves for the revelation at Sinai. Or did they arrive on a Monday? Because in truth, they only needed 6 days to prepare and not 7 days to prepare. So what were these 6 and 7 days about? What were they doing in these days of preparation? So everybody agrees that 3 of those days were used to settle in, to hear the rules of receiving the Torah. And then the rest of the time of the preparation was dedicated to purifying themselves by temporarily separating from their spouses. Fine. So ultimately it comes down to a very, very technical dispute as to whether everyone needed to separate themselves from their spouses for 2 days in order to purify themselves or for 3 days in order to purify themselves. Because if they needed to separate themselves for only 2 days, then the grand total of preparation days comes out to 5, and the Torah was given on the following day, which is the 6th of Sivan. Okay, but if they needed 3 days to purify themselves, to separate themselves, and that bumped the total days of preparation up to 6, and the Torah was given the following day, which is the 7th of Sivan. It's clear? We're good? Complicated part's over. Great. So now the Talmud asks a question. Let's go back inside. The Gemara raises an objection. Doesn't the verse state, and the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments, indicating that the husbands and wives were separated for only 2 days. And the pasuk says, God told Moses, separate the people for today and tomorrow. Today and tomorrow implies clearly that there were only 2 days of purification, not 3. The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yossi could have said to you, Moses added 1 day to the number of days that God commanded based on his own perception. So the Gemara is pretty much saying that while it is true that God commanded only 2 days of purification, of sanctification, Moses decided that it would be a good idea to have an extra day. So he delayed the giving of the Torah for an extra day until the 7th of Sivan. Good. So that's the dispute. Was the Torah given on the 7th day of Sivan or the 6th day of Sivan? I.e., was there a need for 2 days of separation in order for someone to purify themselves, or 3 days of separation? Now, this is a question that's relevant every time somebody wants to purify themselves. Right? There are other laws in Judaism that depend on purity. For example, one is only allowed to enter the Temple Mount if he is ritually pure. So, what makes somebody pure? Is it 2 days of separation or is it 3 days of separation? It's the same question that we're asking over here, right? The interconnectivity of Torah, right? The question about ritual purity affects the historical dispute as to when we got the Torah, right? So what is the law, right? How do we hold? How many days does one need to separate themselves in order to be ritually pure? We hold 3 days. So if that's what we hold, then when do we hold the Torah was given? We hold the Torah was given on the 7th day, right? Because that's what that person in the Gemara holds, that if they had to separate for 3 days, that means the Torah was given on the 7th day. Great, so that's what we hold. Historically speaking, the Torah was given on the 7th of Sivan. Does anybody know when we celebrate Shavuot? We celebrate Shavuot every single year on the 6th day of Sivan. So asks the Magen Avraham, Rabbi Avraham Gambiner, he says, what in the world is going on here? Right, we say that Shavuot is this day of the receiving of the Torah. We're commemorating when we received the Torah at Mount Sinai. So why in the world is Shavuot on the 6th day of Sivan if we hold historically that the Torah was given on the 7th day of Sivan? It's an unbelievable question, and that's our second question. So just to sum up the first two questions. Firstly, it seems clear that on Shavuot, we're celebrating the fact that we received the Torah, but the Torah doesn't mention that. So that was our first question. Why doesn't the Torah mention the reason for this holiday? And the second question is that we celebrate Shavuot every year on the 6th of Sivan, but we hold that historically speaking, the Torah was given on the 7th of Sivan, so it seems like we got the wrong date. Okay, is everyone clear on the first two questions? Any questions? Great, so we can move on to the third question. Just a couple more questions, and then hopefully the answer will be able to sort out all the confusion. So this unclarity that we just saw in the Gemara, that was not the only historical unclarity that existed about the calendaric date of Shavuot. The Torah tells us that we need to count 50 days from Mimachrat Hashabbat, the day following the Sabbath, right? And on day 50, that is Shavuot, right? 50 days, that's Sfirat HaOmer, right? We count between Pesach and Shavuot, and on day 50 is Shavuot. And the first day is Mimachrat HaShabbat, the day following the Sabbath. So what does that mean? The day after what Sabbath? So there was a group of Jews back during the Temple period. They didn't believe in the oral tradition of the Torah. Right? They read everything in the text literally. They did not rely on the interpretations of our sages, which as we'll see later is obviously not a valid ideology. But they also read this text literally. Mimachrat HaShabbat, the day after Sabbath, means that we need to start counting Sfirat HaOmer on Sunday. So 7 weeks later, it'll always be Shavuot on a Sunday, right? An extended weekend every single year. Shavuot always falls out on Sunday. But our tradition tells us that Mimachrat HaShabbat, right? Shabbat can be two different things. It can either mean the day of Sabbath, or it can be a holiday, right? Because that's also a day of rest. A holiday is also a day of rest. So our tradition tells us that Mimachrat HaShabbat means that we count Sfirat HaOmer starting from the second night of Pesach, the day following the first night of Pesach. Okay, so that was the dispute. Right? We who have an oral tradition, we who have rabbinic sages, we say that we start counting from the second night of Pesach, and those who didn't have rabbinic sages, those who didn't follow the oral tradition, they always started counting on Sunday. So generally, our attitude towards people like this are, you could be wrong if you want to, right? Everyone's entitled to their opinion, right is right, wrong is wrong, and live and let live. But this particular dispute got really, really heated and really, really nasty. If you look here, this is from the Megillah Tanit. This is the first scroll that was written down in our oral tradition. And it says that the fight against this group, the Baitusim, the Baithusians, who claim that Shavuot always fell out on Sunday, it got personal. They called the guy an idiot. And they said, you idiot, do not take our pure Torah and make it into a joke. The following Mishnah over here, I won't read it inside, but the Mishnah over here records an entire public ceremony where the entire Jewish people would gather together just to prove that these guys were wrong. These Bethusians were wrong. So the third question is, let's relax, right? Why is everyone getting so heated about this particular dispute, this particular issue? Right? What is it about the holiday of Shavuot that ignited such passions? So that's our third question. Two more questions. We're almost there. Everyone's familiar with the beautiful work that Chabad does around the world. The founder of the Chabad movement, his name was Rabbi Shner Zalman of Liadi, and he wrote a Jewish code of law. It's known as the Shulchan Aruch Harav, and in it he records a very widespread Jewish custom, which is to stay up all night on the first night of Shavuot and immerse ourselves in Torah learning. It's a very, very beautiful custom. It's supposed to form a very deep connection to Torah learning on the day that we did receive the Torah. And obviously this year it might be a little bit more difficult, but it's always recommended. So at first glance, if the point of staying up and learning on the night of Shavuot is in order to connect us to our Torah, then it shouldn't really matter what we learn. And we should pick up any Jewish book, whatever interests us. We should sit there and we should read it, and we should form a connection. But the Shulchan Aruch Harav, Rabbi Shner Zalman of Liadi, he does something very strange. He gives us a reading list. He says that on Shavuot night, when you're sitting and when you're learning, you should be focused only on the oral Torah. We should immerse ourselves in the texts of tradition, Mishnah, Talmud, etc., and we should not necessarily preoccupy ourselves with the reading of scripture, with the reading of the biblical text itself, which is the written Torah. Now, this is also something very, very strange. If the goal of learning Torah on Shavuot is to connect to Torah learning, then why should we care what kind of Torah I read? Oral Torah, written Torah, what difference does it make? Now, why is he subscribing here a reading list? That's the fourth question. So to summarize the first four questions, again, first of all, why doesn't the Torah make any mention of the reason why we celebrate Shavuot? Why doesn't it make any mention of the fact that Shavuot is the day that we receive the Torah? Secondly, why do we celebrate Shavuot on the 6th of Sivan if we hold that the Torah was historically given on the 7th of Sivan? Thirdly, why are we getting so passionate in defense of the proper date of Shavuot? And fourthly, why are we told a specific reading list, a specific type of Torah that we need to learn on Shavuot? So I think it's time for answers, and we can kind of get there by asking one final question. And we saw this Gemara before, but now let's take the opportunity to look at it a little bit closer. This Gemara brings a dispute whether there is a mitzvah to eat on Jewish holidays in general. Right? Must I eat on the holiday? Or if I choose, I can decide that I don't want to eat today. Instead of having a physical aspect to the holiday, I can decide that I want to make this holiday purely spiritual. I can sit down and I can learn Torah the entire day and not eat anything. So that's a dispute in the Gemara. In other words, must there be a physical component to Jewish holidays, or can Jewish holidays be purely spiritual days? Now, the Gemara says that even though there are those who hold that in general you are allowed to sit down and learn Torah the entire day, and you don't need to eat anything on Jewish holidays, but every single person agrees that on the holiday of Shavuot, you must eat something. In the second paragraph over here, Rabbi Elazar said, all agree with regard to Atzeret, the holiday of Shavuot, that we require that it also be for you, meaning that it is a mitzvah to eat, drink, and rejoice on that day. What is the reason? It is the day on which the Torah was given, and one must celebrate the fact that the Torah was given to the Jewish people. Then the Gemara tells a story. The Gemara relates that Rav Yosef, on the day of Shavuot, would say, prepare me a choice third-born calf. Apparently, that's a thing. A third-born calf is particularly delicious. He said, if not for this day on which the Torah was given that caused the Jewish people to have the Torah, how many Yosefs would there be in the market? It is only due to the importance of Torah study that I have become a leader of the Jewish people, and I therefore have a special obligation to rejoice on this day. So that's what the Gemara says. We cannot be purely spiritual on Shavuot because that's the day the Torah was given. Does that make sense to anyone? The day that the Torah was given is the day that we cannot be totally spiritual, totally immersed in learning Torah. I would have thought just the opposite, right? That the day that the Torah is given is specifically the day that we should be totally immersed in learning Torah. Does everyone get that question? It should be the opposite.
It's a good question, Michael.
Thanks. So how do we deal with the Gemara? Why is it that on the day of the giving of the Torah, we put an emphasis specifically on physicality? So that's our final question. And let's go see the answer now. I think the answer to all five of these questions lies in a very basic foundation in Judaism, which is something that we touched upon before. Our Torah is comprised of two parts. We have the written Torah and we have the oral Torah. The written Torah tells us the laws. And the oral Torah extrapolates and explains, it deduces and analyzes, investigates and questions until all these laws become clear to us what the intention of the written Torah was. One without the other is totally incomplete, right? The written Torah without its oral explanations, it just can't possibly be fulfilled properly. Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, he takes this a step further. He asks, what makes the Jewish nation unique? Right? There have been many nations that have adopted our biblical text, right? They've claimed it as their own. What then separates and distinguishes Judaism from other religions? So the answer is that he gives is that God gifted us the tools to the oral Torah, which is a tradition that's passed from generation to generation that only the Jewish nation are privy to. The quote from him, he says, the oral Torah is our unique covenant with God because it is what makes us so special and different. And this is not just true on a national level, it's also true on an individual level. The oral Torah is infinite. Right? There's always room to reconsider one's analysis, to delve further into the text, to create deeper connections between different aspects of the Torah. There's always more in that endless sea that is our Torah. It's infinite. And I would like to suggest that it is this Torah that we are celebrating on Shavuot. Rashi writes on the Gemara that we saw before, why did Rabbi Yosef prepare a fancy meal for himself on Shavuot? So Rashi says three words that are so powerful that literally if this is the only thing that you walk out of here with, it would be totally worth it. He says, Lamadati Torah v'nisramamti. I learned Torah and I became elevated by it. The celebration of Shavuot is not merely the fact that we were given the Torah. It's the fact that we were given our Torah. It's a celebration of our ability to contribute to the development of God's words. It's a celebration of the gift that we received to be able to form our own personal connection with the divine. It's an acknowledgement of this fact that Lamadati Torah v'nisramamti. The Torah was able to change who I am as a person. It was able to open my eyes to the world. It was able to give me clarity about who I am and what I'm doing here. And that is the celebration of Shavuot. Shavuot is a celebration of us, of me and you, and everyone else who has decided that Torah is something that is relevant to them. And that's why everyone agrees on Shavuot that you need to eat and you need to drink and you need to be merry. Because above all else, Shavuot is a holiday that's about you. It's about how Torah is able to penetrate to the deepest levels of your being. And when you sit down and learn on Shavuot, says Rabbi Shlomo Zalman of Liadi, says the Shulchan Aruch Harav, do me a favor. Make sure you read something from the oral Torah specifically, because the Shavuot is not just a celebration of the Torah. It's a celebration of your Torah, of our Torah. So he says to make it about you. Use your time of your learning at night to apply it to yourself. Learn the oral Torah, right? The Torah where you can contribute based on your analysis, your thoughts, your questions, your answers. So in Jewish history, there have been those who denied this fact, this fact that human beings have this ability to analyze the Torah, to contribute to our tradition. These were those Baitusim, those Bastusians, and the traditional Jews pushed back on them with all the force that they had because we were telling them, don't mess with Shavuot. Shavuot is the day that it proves above all else that these people were wrong, that man does have the ability to develop the Torah, which is the very thing that this group, these Bathusians, denied. Now to get back to our first two questions. Right? Why do we celebrate Shavuot on the sixth day if the Torah was given on the seventh day? So what happened on the sixth day? The sixth day is the day that Moses stood up and he decided, no, we're not going to give the Torah today. We're going to do it tomorrow instead. The sixth day is the day where man showed his connection to the Torah, that it is ours, that we have the right to develop and to interpret the will of God. God said that we only need 2 days to separate. But Moses got up and said, no, I believe that God's will is to separate for 3 days. And on the day that Moses said that, that's the day that we celebrate Shavuot. Not on the seventh day when we got the written Torah, but on the sixth day when Moses maintained his right to interpret the Torah. And now back to our first question. Right, why wasn't Shavuot written in the Torah? Why isn't this reason found in the Torah? Because the receiving of the Torah that we're talking about on Shavuot is the receiving of this oral Torah. It could not have been written in the Torah because that would go against the entire purpose of the celebration. We're celebrating the human contribution to Torah. We're celebrating the day when the Torah became our own Torah. Now, the final question that we have to address is how do we accomplish this, right? How do we make the Torah become our own? And the answer lies in this Gemara here in Avodah Zarah, which says that at the beginning of our studies of Torah, we're collectors of information. and this is what God says to do, this is what God says not to do, and this is obviously step one in all Torah learning, and we need to know what the rules are. But then after a while, one acquires ownership of the Torah. One knows enough now to contribute their own novel ideas to the world of Torah. They know enough to add this drop of water to the infinite sea of Torah, and then the Torah becomes their own. And such a person can walk away and say, Lamadati Torah v'nisramamti. Like Ksav Sofer, Rabbi Avram Shmuel ben Yamin Sofer, says that this is true in a very real way, that each of us has our own unique portion in Torah. The Torah is, in a very real sense, ours. And he says if we work hard enough, and if we learn a lot, then we will find our unique portion in the Torah. And then we can walk away from a day like Shavuot and say, Lamadati Torah v'nisramamti, that the Torah was able to affect me personally. The Torah was able to lift me up in a very, very special way, that we were able to find ourselves and our unique portions in the Torah itself. So thank you all for joining. Thank you all for listening. This has been a lot of fun.